I'd like to officially welcome you all to this webinar. Great to see so many people joining up. You can see the numbers clicking up as people come in, and several hundred people actually registered for this webinar, which is, again, just amazing to see how much interest there is in nature and cities and all these related issues. This webinar is of course on spatial planning and urban nature plans. And my name is Kes McCormick. I'm a professor at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and I'll be helping with some of the moderation today, but we will hear several voices today and several people presenting insights and thoughts from around Europe. This webinar is brought to you by the UNP Plus project, or the Urban Nature Plans Plus project, which would be fair to say is a leading project in Europe around urban nature plans. And as part of that project, we've been developing a capacity building program, both developing our own materials from within the project, but also linking into the many materials that are available through other projects and other initiatives and other organizations, particularly in Europe. It's really exciting times for urban nature plans. I've said this in several of the webinars now. There's so much happening both on the ground and at the policy level. And I think that we're going to see, some transformations of cities across Europe with more greening of cities over the coming decades. And spatial planning is one of the absolutely top topics. It's an enabler for nature in cities. It can also block nature in cities. But we're seeing it as a real way to bring nature into cities in new ways. So today in this webinar, we're going to have several different parts. We're going to have a presentation on the UNP Plus Spatial Planning Scheme. This will be by Alessandro Deserti, who's going to present this part of the work from the UNP Plus project. Alessandro is also the coordinator for the entire project, the UNP Plus project. So he's our captain of the ship, as you might say, and he's going to lead us through today, and he's been leading us through in this project as well. In addition to that, we've got some great voices, Gillian Dick from Glasgow and Frida Brett-Smith from Mannheim, to bring in these kind of city perspectives. They've got many things to say, many things to share, and it's really important that we have these city perspectives kind of integrating with science and research. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end to bring up questions that are popping up in the chat. So we really encourage you, please use the chat function. Jump into the chat, make comments, raise questions. We'll answer them as we go, and then we'll try to pick up some of the key questions near the end of this webinar. So without further ado, Alessandro, I'd like to hand it over to you to lead us through this presentation. Please add anything that I may have missed now at the start of this introduction, but the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kes. Your introduction was definitely complete and perfect. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar of the UNP Plus Capacity Building Program. As Kes has already mentioned, my name is Alessandro Deserti. I'm professor at the Polytechnic di Milan, Department of Design, and I'm the coordinator of the UNP Plus project, the project that started in 2024 and will end by the end of this year. UNP Plus builds on and expands the original UNP process you might be familiar with. In case you're not, I will briefly illustrate it. The aim of this project is to deepen and strengthen it by providing updated guidance, structured methodologies, and additional tools for cities that want to develop, implement, and also continuously improve the urban nature plans. Today we will focus specifically on the spatial planning scheme, which is one of the key components developed within the project. This webinar specifically focuses on how spatial planning can actively leverage multifunctional urban nature. As urban nature is not only about biodiversity conservation, we think that it's about climate adaptation, public health, social cohesion, water management, and I would say overall urban resilience. To unlock this multifunctionality, spatial planning definitely plays a significant role. Before I go further, I would like to acknowledge that the work that I'm presenting today is the result of a strong collective effort within the UNP Plus consortium, and in particular, the Spatial Planning Scheme was developed jointly by Tecnalia and the Polytechnic di Milano. Here I would like to especially thank and mention the Tecnalia team, Gemma Garcia, who cannot be with us today as she is traveling, Adriana Aguirre and Carolina Mandruga, as they gave a substantial contribution to shaping the structure and also the operational logic of the scheme that I will briefly introduce. While at the Politecnico di Milano, I have worked closely with Beatrice Bellet, who supported me in conceptualizing this component and in many other activities which are related to its development and the overall conduction of the project. So thank you all for the work that we have done together, which I'm honored to be introducing today. What you see today is in the end definitely co-created product, which results from collaboration between different institutions with different capacities, and a constant dialogue between researchers, practitioners, and the cities that take part in the project. In order to understand the spatial planning scheme, we, I think, need to situate it within the UNP process. The previous webinar was fully dedicated to this, but I would like to briefly recall it, starting from the broader European policy context that frames what we are doing. As you all know, over the past few years, urban nature has moved to the center of the EU environmental policy. In particular, the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 explicitly calls on European cities to develop ambitious urban greening plans. This was kind of a strong political signal. Cities were recognized and are recognized as key actors in biodiversity recovery and ecosystem restoration. More recently, this direction has been reinforced and I would say also made more concrete by the Nature Restoration Regulation, which just entered into force. Under the Nature Restoration Regulation, member states are required to prepare national restoration plans up to 2050. The deadline for this is approaching, and urban ecosystems are explicitly included under Article 8, which sets binding targets for urban green space and tree canopy cover, which means that urban nature is not only and not anymore a voluntary sustainability ambition, as it is now embedded within a binding European restoration framework. In this evolving context, cities are kind of expected to deliver. The Nature Restoration Regulation aims at member states and the overall performance of member states, but cities will be in the front line. And as for this, they need structured tools to translate these European ambitions into their local planning systems. Here is where the UNP process comes into play. As a reminder, and as you see from this slide, the UNP process is structured into three main phases: preparation, action planning, implementation, and monitoring. The phases are iterative, they are interconnected, they are also grounded in co-creation. They provide kind of a structured pathways for cities to develop, adopt, and implement urban nature plans. The Spatial Planning Scheme, which we will introduce today, does not have any ambition to replace this process. Rather, its ambition is to strengthen the UNP process by embedding spatial planning logic and multiscalar coordination across all the UNP phases. In short, what we want to do with the spatial planning scheme is to help cities connect these high-level European ambitions with concrete spatial planning practices. To go on framing a bit, I would like to also briefly introduce the UNP Plus framework, as the spatial planning scheme is part of this broader framework, which has, you see it here, three main pillars. The first is the ambitions, which stays as kind of a strategic level, which means for us having the understanding that we need to integrate core principles and support ambitious goal setting and emphasize cross-cutting themes such as climate resilience, biodiversity, and social equity. This for us was very relevant, a significant addition to the original UNP process, something that stays, let's say, at a less operational and more strategic level. But we also worked on the UNP process to provide detailed guidance and to support cities with self-assessment and with structured planning steps and the descriptions and the guidance for these structured planning steps. And third, we are concluding the development of what we call support structure, which includes knowledge building. This capacity building program is exactly part of these support structures, but also sharing practical cases and enabling continuous reflection and improvement. The spatial planning scheme contributes to all these three pillars, as it strengthens the strategic framing by clarifying spatial planning principles. It also strengthens operational enabling by offering concrete guidance on how to embed those principles into concrete planning steps. So, the UNP Plus Spatial Planning Scheme. Here you see the co-structure of the Spatial Planning Scheme, which is built around 6 key principles. The very first one is commit to long-term ambition, as urban nature requires political continuity and long-term vision. The second one, which is a significant addition to the original UNP Plus process, which was primarily focused on urban spaces, is to enable regional coherence, as urban ecosystems do not stop at the administrative borders, and planning must be considered also a regional matter and consider regional ecological systems. The third one is to activate multiscalar spatial planning, which is the continuation of the previous one, but looking at different planning scales, which means coordinating across the neighborhood, the city, and the regional level. One more principle is that we need to bridge the so-called integration gap, as urban nature must be embedded across sectors, which involves mobility, housing, infrastructure, economic development, and other sectors. The fifth one is to mainstream biodiversity, as nature shouldn't be treated as kind of an add-on, but as a core planning component or planning dimension. And the sixth one is to strengthen climate resilience through urban nature, as green and blue infrastructure must actively support adaptations. These principles move from strategic ambitions and go to the operational integration. The strategic scheme is characterized by three features that we wanted to attribute to it: flexibility, modularity, and scalability, which means allowing cities that have different capacities and different legal context to adapt the scheme to their specific needs. Operationally, it works through what we call the operational metrics, which addresses organizational, procedural, and normative dimensions across all the UNP phases. So the components are actually these three: organizational, procedural, and normative dimensions. Flexibility is definitely the key feature that we wanted to attribute to the spatial planning scheme. As cities differ quite widely in terms of governance structures, legal frameworks, political priorities to some extent, and also administrative capacities, which are also connected to a different size of the cities. For this reason, the scheme does not prescribe kind of a fixed model. Instead, we wanted to offer a structured and adaptable approach that cities can integrate into their existing planning frameworks. Flexibility also means recognizing that spatial planning is an evolving and non-linear process. So monitoring the results that we have, learning from the implementation, and adjusting actions and tools over time are kind of essential components of what we call adaptive planning. Very difficult to achieve, indeed. Here, what I would like to notice is that, in a sense, flexibility enables learnings, and vice versa. If we include the capacity to learn from implementation, we also have the possibility to make the planning process more flexible and more adaptive. The operational metrics, which is at the core of the spatial planning scheme, translates the principles that I mentioned into action. This is its key objective. So for each suggested action at every step of the UNP process, we have structured guidance around four key questions that you see here: why, what, how, and with which practical resources. This ensures that actions are not only aspirational, but sort of grounded into a sound implementation logic. For each action, we clarify the aim, the gaps or criticalities that it addresses, the activities and methods involved, the useful tools and the best practices one can refer to, and of course, expected results and recommendations for application. The metric is therefore strategic on the one hand and practical on the other hand. The let's say high level objective is to bridge visions and implementation. Let me use a concrete example to better illustrate this. I took one of the 20 actions that we examined within and for which we provided guidance within the operational metrics. Here, the action is to assess the current state of urban nature and identify special demand for targeted planning. Why? Because without understanding spatial distribution, which means where nature is, where it is lacking, and where the demand is highest, interventions risk being fragmented or inequitable. What we foresee here, two key activities, baseline inventory and an ecosystem service analysis. How to do this? Through specific methods, ecosystem service mapping and spatial analysis, and with which available resources. In this case, we point to GIS tools and modeling platforms. One example is Invest, which is part of the collection of resources that the Spatial Planning Scheme makes available or points to. This example shows how the scheme connects ecological analysis with planning decisions, making the multifunctionality that I mentioned visible, but also, I'd say, measurable. And well, for now, the Spatial Planning Scheme is part of a technical deliverable. It's a very large, complex metrics which we released. What we are now at work at is to transform this into a digital tool. This will make the scheme more accessible. Will allow cities to navigate the metrics interactively, explore our suggested actions, and access the tools and the examples. The intention that we have here is to support practitioners in a more user-friendly way, so not just a static framework that we released so far, but a dynamic and accessible interface, which will come soon. We are already at work on it. In this sense, the scheme aims at being not only a conceptual contribution, but also a practical planning tool. I would say sort of a planning companion for those that work in the field of urban nature planning. Just to conclude, the UNP Spatial Planning Scheme aims to strengthen the spatial dimension of urban nature plans. It provides principles, operational guidance, and in our objectives, adaptive flexibility. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and now look forward to moving into our dialogue with Glasgow and Mannheim, where we can explore how these ideas translate into their real planning practice. So here I'm very pleased to introduce our guests who will help us reflect on those themes that I mentioned from their city perspective. First, we are joined by Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council in the United Kingdom. Gillian works within the Development Plan Group, Neighbourhood, Regeneration and Sustainability. Her work is closely connected to how spatial planning can integrate sustainability objectives, urban nature considerations, and the active participation of citizens. We are also joined by Frida Brett-Smith from the city of Mannheim in Baden-Württemberg, Germany. Frida is the local Green Deal manager for land use, working at the interface between climate policy, biodiversity strategy, and urban development. We are bringing together two cities with different planning traditions, governance structures, and policy context, but both actively engaging with the challenge of embedding multifunctional urban nature into spatial planning. The idea of this dialogue is not to present a single plan, but to reflect on experiences, challenges, and adaptations, and the lessons learned from the cities. So let me warmly welcome Gillian and Frida, and thank you both for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you to briefly introduce your city, context, and reflect on what you see as your city's strongest achievement or distinguished feature in urban nature planning. Let's start with Frida, and let me move to Mannheim. Welcome, Frida.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Alessandro, just one organizational question. Are you in the online presentation? Could
Yes.
you refresh it maybe? I put another picture there. If you can refresh it one time, the browser. But in the meantime, thank you so much.
I think I need to stop the presentation and restart it to
Okay, that
possibly
would
do
be
this.
amazing.
I fear, but I will try.
Thank you so much. Okay, in the meantime, very briefly, I'm very thankful to participate in this webinar. Thank you so much for the invitation, and we're very happy to be one of the cities working in the Urban Nature Plans Plus process, which really helps us go through all these steps and invest time and work and get professional support with our process. I work for the city of Mannheim, as was said, in the southwest of Germany. We have a population of around 330,000 citizens and are a very diverse city, not only with nationalities, but also what our city looks like, what is the spatial profile of our city. We are famous for being one of the hottest cities in Germany, which has to do with the fact that our city center, where commerce and traffic and shopping, but also residence areas, has a high degree of ceiling. That's why our city has recognized very quickly that we have to adapt in our planning and our future development to climate changes, the lack of nature, and look for nature-based solutions. Francesco, Alessandro, let me know once you're ready with the slides.
I'm sharing. I'm not sure if you can actually see my screen.
We can't see it yet.
Sorry,
okay,
probably
that's fine.
made some kind of mess while reopening the presentation.
Sorry from my side. So with that background of a very hot city center, but also outer areas, which you will hopefully see soon on the map, have also a lot of forests, a lot of green areas where there's potential for nature conservation, for endangered species, and also this idea of bringing nature into the city center, the populated areas, but also all the nature-based solution benefits, for example, of air, of a biodiversity, a biotope network. That is what the city looked at when we, in the last couple of years, developed our update of our spatial development concept for the whole city called Model Spatial Order. And it's based on the city strategy of bringing quality of life for our citizens, adapting to changes like a growing population, as I said, climate change effects, but keeping up quality mental health, physical health, a tourist attraction, a nice location to work. So all these different goals that should be reached with our model spatial order. And there was a process of participation with the city society and the departments to figure out this model. If it doesn't happen now, we will show the map later, but one example where we look, or what we emphasize, right, as our achievement in spatial planning is really this priority of preparing for the future and recognizing the benefits of nature and nature-based solutions and ecosystem services. That's why, for example, with new developments, we are prioritizing the solutions of doing inner city developments while protecting our green corridors on the outer parts of the city and the biotope network, which will then also bring in cooling and winds, for example, from the outer city to the inner city. We have new neighborhoods that have been perfect. Oh, well, I think it's still the old, but that's fine. If you go to slide 14. We had new residential areas, whole neighborhoods that have been developed in the last couple of years that had been former military sites. And they had very interesting concepts. They gave the contracts and the land to developers not for the highest paying price, but for the best concepts. With high requirements of green spaces. So some of the residential areas have up to 70% of green spaces in between the buildings. And it's all for climate adaptation. And right next to these to these new neighborhoods, there's, for example, 80 hectares of a nature protected park where there is a lot of space for nature and endangered species, but also people being able to use it for recreation and for walks while respecting nature. So yeah, here you can see one of the maps. If we send anything or show something later, I can show you the map where you can see more the different uses. But I think I've talked a lot already. So yeah, just to sum it up, we do feel the need for nature and for a future-proof spatial planning. That's what we thankfully integrated in our newest spatial development concept over the last couple of years with participation. And we try to marry the different needs of people and nature, and resiliency in our city with our concepts. And we have also already brought a lot to life, and we're happy that we're following this direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Frida. And now I'll pass word to Gillian.
Okay, bearing in mind we've got... Yeah, it's fine. Bearing in mind we've got 14 minutes for a dialogue, I'm not going to talk at the minute because all of the answers will come out in the questions. The 3 diagrams you've got there is on the left-hand side. We're really proud of our environmental digital twin, which is where we've taken all the mapping and put it in an open source dashboard. So all our communities can see all of the information that we all know, but we hide behind things, or we hide behind excuses that people can't get maps. People rely on Google. So I will put the link in the chat, or I will send it to Kes. Please play with it. Paris has a similar one. London has a similar one. The more you can create a dashboard where people can layer maps, so it's gone back to my old-fashioned planning thing of planchettes and tracing paper, the better. The right-hand side, I will send you a proper diagram of this, living well locally. Everybody needs lots of different things to live well locally. You can't have urban without rural. Etiv and my team, who's one of the co-designers of the place standard in Scotland, has done a lot of mapping of what you need to live well locally, and I'll send you that diagram. And it would be remiss of me to not talk about connecting nature, which led into all of this urban nature stuff. So the connecting nature framework, I didn't put co-impact in there, but I'm a co-designer of that. Brilliant tool for figuring out what you're going to do to measure impact of nature-based solutions in all 5 of its categories. But what the connecting nature framework says front and center is no project ever ends. There is never a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're going round and round. Your planning informs your delivery, informs your stewardship, informs your planning, informs your delivery. Our funding models are broken. They give us funding for planning and delivery, and to heck with stewardship. I'll shut up there and we'll get to the depths of that in the 12 minutes we've got left for dialogue.
Thanks, Gillian. And let's move on to the second introductory presentation from the cities. Can you please go to the next slide, Bea? Yes. Go ahead.
So do you want me to jump in, or Mannheim's going in? So we're going to the inspirational stuff at the end rather than the questions?
Yes, because
we can't be inspiring unless we've answered the questions, I would guess, but we're inspiring first.
Yeah, Alessandro, should we bring some questions in from the audience here?
Yes,
it feels pretty natural.
Yes, definitely. Yes, sure.
I can jump in here because I think, I mean, first and foremost, fantastic, Gillian and Frida, to I think very, very nice messages, and Gillian very, very to the point, which is great. I think we need to be. Just looking across, I mean, there's over 100 people here. There's people from all over Europe, fascinating to see, and people from all over the world as well. I mean, all the way to Fiji and Australia, which is my part of the world where I grew up. But it just shows again kind of the interest in these topics that we're talking about today. And I think that there's some great questions here. So I can jump into some of these questions if we want, but I think it'll draw out a little bit from Gillian and Frida, kind of further points they could make. I'll kind of go in a little bit of an order, but one of the first questions raised was about kind of the quantitative side of urban nature plans and how much use of modeling or quantification is in these plans, or is it mostly a qualitative approach? So I don't know, Frida, do you have any thoughts on that, or Gillian, jump in? I mean, this kind of, do we use numbers to help guide us?
I can kind of jump in. There is a real temptation to just go for quantity. Quantity tells you absolutely nothing. We've had Parks Department say, we're taking out one mature tree and we're replacing it with 3 1-meter saplings. That doesn't tell you the health of the tree, the age of the tree, how much carbon it's locking. It doesn't tell you whether they're keeping their fingers crossed for those 3 1-meter saplings to survive. So, and technically you could end up losing 4 trees instead of 1. You need to know the lived experience. You need to know there's no point in measuring and saying, right, everybody is within 400 meters of open space, unless that open space is of good quality, multifunctional, and the people feel safe in it. So I could be really, really near an open space, but as a female, not feel safe in it, not want to go and use it, not feel othered, feel it's not for me. So a lot of girls feel othered by multi-use games courts and football pitches. We have deprived communities that are feeling othered at the minute because their one bit of open space is being taken over by water voles. So there's also a contest between human species and nature species. So what is nature restoration for some of our communities? What are we restoring it to, and whose quality are we fixing? But if we continue to just count, we're never going to restore anything.
Oh, it's a fantastic point. I think we're so used to managing through numbers, obviously. So we use numbers to manage and so on. And I think that like you're saying, when it comes to nature and biodiversity, quantity is not a good measurement. If it's the only measurement we're going to use, we're going to need to be looking very much at quality. And like you said, very much context specific, and the different experiences by different groups or individuals in different urban environments. Frida, have you got your microphone on? Can you also give us some
I'm sorry.
thoughts?
I was thrown out of the meeting, some technical issues, but I'm there, and I'm
you were
really
kicked
there.
out. Well, you're back. You're back
Yeah,
again.
I'm there. Thank you so much, Gillian, for this great message and really, a call to action. I'm totally there with you. It's very difficult if you're, for example, looking at like climate protection, to then argue in city council how much CO2 does something save, or some energy production, because we can't go in this direction of, for example, let's cut down trees to put in solar because we will save more CO2 or energy. There are a lot of studies. There's always new information coming in of how you could evaluate NBS solutions. But no matter what metric you use, we know if there's healthy environment, like a healthy environment and more space, it will improve. But it's also really about the quality, looking at the nature restoration regulation, where we will have to measure spatial goals, quantitative goals, but also these goals of improving trends, which we don't know yet how to really measure or what will be the requirements, but we need a positive trend of quality of species, of biotopes. Yeah.
It's also worth knowing, Kes, if you think about the UK or Scotland, we're sitting on the edge. We're pretending we're not part of Europe at the minute. Scotland is tracking nature restoration. We have statutory open space plans, statutory forest and woodland strategy, and Glasgow has signed to the Berlin Urban Nature Pact. So we do a lot of hacking around the problems we have or the issues we have in a UK context, of those that have knowledge, recognizing that we are fundamentally part of Europe, and what we do in Scotland or what we do in the UK because of the prevailing winds has an impact on Ireland, or it has an impact on mainland Europe and vice versa. But it's also worth knowing that it's incredibly difficult to restore nature when the budget doesn't sit with the folk doing nature, because it's still seen on the accounting books as nice to have, or it's seen as a zero and negative impact. So all that's on the books is the maintenance costs. The people who get the value, so the education department that gets kids who are better learners, the health department that doesn't have to do more asthma clinics or has fitter people, none of that savings in those budgets come back to that nature restoration. So the cause and effect is completely disconnected in budgets. And will continue to be so for a very long time, because even though we and all the research we've got can show the connections, until the financial budgets connect, and certainly the economic arguments are still on bricks and mortar, they're not on anything else. So it doesn't matter whether it's, and Europe might be a bit better, but the same is happening across the world. The calculations are on how many houses can you build, how many offices can you build, how many jobs do you create. The green metrics, the nature metrics, are nowhere near front and center, and they're nowhere near even on the edge to allow that impact to budgets and the way that we do things to be made. That's we end up hacking, and hacking is the best advice I can give somebody. Hack around the system, make it work for you, do what you can.
I mean, there's so many fantastic points here. There's a truckload of questions coming through related to what you just talked a little bit about. I mean, one question here that just popped up is around this kind of what you just talked a little bit about, Gillian, but about this kind of how we make sense of decisions, the kind of cost-benefit analysis, and how we're shaping our budgets. Are there tools apart from hacking, or tools or other approaches that you use to kind of show in a smart way the cost benefit analysis, let's say, of decisions around nature in cities?
It's really difficult. The budget decisions are taking place elsewhere. We're about to go into a Scottish election, which could change our complete direction of travel. In a year's time, we've got local government elections. Depending if we go greener, that's fine. It'll start to play into this. But if we go further to the centre right, then we could be looking at old-fashioned economic metrics again. There's also a huge push because there's a housing crisis and we need to build more housing. The disconnect then is between the tools that you need to make those things happen and big business, particularly in a UK perspective, we've got volume house builders who are making profit for their shareholders. You've got office, retail, student accommodation people who are making profit for their shareholders. Anything green is seen as hitting away at their profits. But if the green is going in and they can make a bigger profit off of it, great. But there's still that disconnect. So I've often said we need a systemic change in the way that budgets are set, local governments are set, because we're actually working on a 100-year-old model that fundamentally hasn't changed since local authorities and governmental budgets were brought into the modern world. So we're working off a 1900s budgetary system, in effect, and that's incredibly difficult to change across the whole of Europe, UK, USA, wherever. Nobody has sat down and said, this is rubbish, we're working off a 100-year-old system, it needs to change. We just tinker at the edges.
Gillian, does this budgeting issue also connect with the coordination across sectors? I mean, are there also silos in the attribution of budget to the different sectors? Which affect coordination and integration of their activities, as you mentioned.
I'll go quickly because Frida's got a hand up, but we have statutory documents for delivery plans and none of the budget comes to me, goes straight to the delivery sector, so to parks, to roads, and then I try and run interference to get, and I've now started saying top slice 100k of that budget, so I can do some feasibility stuff, or I can do some stuff that will make you spend your budget more efficiently. But the silos are there front and centre because we're on 5-year budgetary or 3-year budgetary, and that can change. Frida, jump in.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great stuff, Gillian. I just wanted to jump in with some examples of maybe how we as a city try to approach these problems. I mean, like there's of course, budget is a huge leverage. It's not on the municipal level, it's on European, national, and so on. Also very much defining, but what can we do as a city? We have recognized with our climate action plan, for example, that what the city actually has in hand is maybe up to 30%. Like 70% of emissions, of action of land use is happening through private actors. May that be institutions, organizations, or companies. And with this example that I mentioned of our highly sealed city center, 80% of that city center is sealed, and 90% of that sealed land is in private hands. So we can make regulations, and we do have some regulations where when you build something new, you have to put green roofs, or 30% of this area has to be a green courtyard, but it doesn't necessarily have to be diverse. You know, we're trying to work with the law, but it's sometimes quite minimal also, or you have regulations that are still not being done, and then when the damage is done, the trees cut down, the green space is converted into a concrete parking lot. It's difficult to change. So what we try to do is really foster and encourage and support the action of city society stakeholders, also targeting and speaking with companies very directly. And we have created different guidelines. For example, in the city center, because of the lack of space, we focus on greening of buildings, roofs, facades, and unsealing. And we have, for example, created very specific like Mannheim guides, step-to-step implementation. What do you need to know technically? What tests do you need to do on your building? What departments in Mannheim and agencies you have to go to put in which building permits? What are the costs you can estimate? There's also online cadasters where our spatial planning department made analysis, like all the city center where you could put green roofs. What are the technical requirements and how much money it would cost you? And we're also pushing the information, of course, like the narrative, but also the proven information of how that could help you, for example, save costs. So, for example, if you have more permeable surfaces, then you save on drainage costs or something like this. in the long run. If you have more greening insulation, you have less costs for using AC or something like this. So we're really approaching the people that own the land, who develop the land, who can do something on their land, to give them resources, also some funding, although funding is being cut, but we use all ways of encouragement. And especially my group, we're very privileged to work very interdisciplinary and go out and talk to the city stakeholders, not only have them come to us when they need a permit for something, but to actually encourage, prevent negative trends, and help them with specific tailored information, step-to-step guidelines, and really matching them with funding where we can, even with our limited resources. So that's how we try to, change the spatial realities and improve them.
It would be of interest to know how private land is leveraged also in a different planning framework. So, Gillian, do you also have something similar in terms of issues and also approach?
The issues are the same. Our climate or our sustainability team worked with Mott MacDonald consultant to have a look at how we get to net zero. 60% of the heavy lifting is emissions and energy, buildings, blah, blah, blah. 40% will never be done by changing how you build buildings, whatever. It has to be done by nature-based solutions. That's difficult when we as a city council only own 30% of the land. And that's all of the land, whether it's our open space, grey, blue or green, or whether it's stuff we've got things built on. The other 70% is in private ownership. We have vast amounts of vacant derelict land. It's a push-pull, because there's a push to build on that land to get a financial return, to have it zoned as housing, have it zoned as open as retail or whatever. But that land currently has trees, wildflowers, some form of biodiversity on it, even though it is contaminated, for instance. But we have huge amounts of our river owned in private ownership because of privatisation in the UK back in the 80s and 90s. So Peel Ports own an awful lot of what most people would think is public land, and it isn't. We're contending with a flooding issue, but people still want to build in the floodplain. So we've got that. How do you build in a 100-year floodplain? Should you build in that? Should you repair the quay walls? Do you repair them as a nature-based solution? But it's really, really difficult because the financial calculations do not take account of the nature. That it is literally anything you can depreciate. So we are trying with the levers we have of guidance of how to include biodiversity, how to do sustainable urban drainage. The National Planning Framework 4 in Scotland is brilliant with its 32 national policies. The issues we've got is how do you interpret that locally? And will we end up with 32 different sets of guidance? So Aberdeen's guidance will be different from Glasgow's, will be different to Edinburgh. There's bits where our national key agencies are tracking behind the curve because we're already using those policies, but we're just working now on the Scottish biodiversity metric, which will be both quantity and quality, because we've looked at what happened down south with BNG, where there's some really weird quantified biodiversity going in that you might argue was a tick box exercise. So there's lots of levers. It's about keeping talking. It's about saying to people, why wouldn't you do this? It's about having those conversations and keeping those conversations going. But we also do things that cost us nothing. So we have Every Tree Tells a Story, where we're just trying to get people to tell us the stories about trees, inspired by Melbourne's QR codes. But we've got Strathclyde, Cali Uni, Glasgow Uni, the School of Art, and ourselves working on that for no money. We have no budget, but people think this thing will go big and are working on it and are doing little bits. But it's the business school at Strathclyde that's working on it. So it's, if you don't try, you'll never learn, and don't be scared to fail would be my other bit. You didn't learn to walk by stopping when you fell over. You picked yourself up and carried on walking till you knew how to do it properly.
Indeed. We're flying through the time, and I think we've got a few minutes left, and we're already coming into inspirational messages. So perhaps there's so many questions in the chat, and we're going to try to collect those and follow up with them afterwards. And certainly people who are attending today are very welcome to contact the UNP Plus project, get in contact with us. I'm sure you can find Gillian and Frida online as well, and myself and Alessandro. And there's been lots of materials available through our website. But should we go to our final slides, Alessandro, on the kind of inspirational messages? I think, or if we skip, I think we'll give one more. I think I'd give the word over to Frida and Gillian one more time. We'll go to Frida first. Frida, if you had one more thing to say to everyone listening today, what would that be from your experiences in Mannheim?
One more thing. Yeah, I would also agree, as Gillian said, don't give up, and also pool your resources and kind of build an alliance of the willing, like we experienced here. I think we have great strategy and super smart people in our departments, and then it's so valuable and so helpful to drive when you find colleagues who are passionate, who know their work, who like to work together. So I would suggest finding these people, really engaging, involving them, keeping up to date, and and having like a common goal and a common strategy, because there are so many different needs and requirements, as you said, housing, nature, and so on. But when you find like a common goal and you make maybe some compromises or just keep each other updated, do participation in the development of strategies, of programs, that's so important. So to like strengthen yourself and to actually bring about like the implementation, not only the plan, but the implementation, I would say really build these alliances within the administration, but also, as I said, really approach the city society and start from there, right?
So I would add, just to, because we're running out of time, so be risk aware, not risk averse. Back yourself because you have been trained and you know what you think is professionally right. Surround yourself with people who you can sense check that with. Be really aware that because silos operate within large authorities, a silo is a very dark, dank, wet, black place to be. Slippery sides and incredibly difficult for people to get themselves out. So they will be stressed and they will be risk averse and they will fight back. And you just have to acknowledge that and sense check what you're doing. Surround yourselves with networks. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I'm no good in a room where you hand me a cup of tea and say, talk to people. I'm great on a stage, but the pandemic created a brilliant network for me. That online network of people who've got your back you, sense check you, understand what you're trying to do is incredibly powerful. And it makes me positive every day. So I can have a really, really tough time at work, but I've got a network of people that I can sense check. Did I get that right? Did I say something stupid? Am I going on the right track? Find a way to vent if you have to in a safe space. But ultimately, people will fight for a place they have an attachment to. They won't fight for a space, but they will fight for a place. It has a cultural heritage, human attachment, which is why I say take a place-based approach. Every move you make is a nature-based solution. So you're doing nature-based solutions when you are building bricks and mortar. So you just have to remind people that everything they do is a nature-based solution because they are building on nature. And that takes you towards climate resilient communities. And you need to make communities as resilient as possible.
Well, I mean, it's fair to say thank you so much both for coming and for being so straight and for giving so much great insights here. I mean, I think that, I would just add that I think that there is great momentum behind urban nature and cities, but I think, Gillian, what you're saying there as well is also very true. There are many forces at play that push back against such developments. And then like you were saying, Frida, I mean, these kind of networks and communities of practice and what the online world does open up for us where we can connect and talk this way and keep these conversations conversation going is so powerful, but it is definitely not just something that's going to roll out across Europe. It's something we're going to have to kind of push for and fight for, and spatial planning is part of that, but there's many other elements that need to be pulled in. Alessandro, would you like to say some final words on these slides? You want me to keep going?
No, just remind all and announce to all that we will have this NBS festival in November. We will be there at the very center of the event with our final event of the project. This will happen in Paris on the 4th and the 5th of November. And Kes, I will pass word to you to announce the forthcoming webinars.
Yes, I mean, it's fair to say that Gillian and Frida have given a great introduction to our next webinars. We're going to take up a webinar on financing and how on earth we unlock kind of private finance into urban nature. This is an enormous challenge and requires some quite difficult conversations, I think, about the world around us and about how systems are set up. But there are also kind of some very practical ways to shape business models and so on. So we're going to have a webinar around that. In May, justice through urban nature plans, the expectations around justice nowadays is very high, that we need to put this kind of front and center and be thinking of our nature plans as a way to embolden justice and to bring justice out in our cities. And again, to confront some challenging questions. And then finally, around the kind of assessment, monitoring, I think Gillian talked about it, stewardship as well. How do we continue on with urban nature once we've designed it and implemented it? What do we do next? Because there's an enormous role there for what comes next and how we kind of continue to work with nature in our cities. So we have lots of webinars in front of us. The dates will come out soon. The invitations will come out soon. If there's people in the audience that would like to get in contact with us, like I already said, please do. You'll find all of our contact information on the UNP Plus website. And I'd just like to thank Alessandro again for the great presentation, Alessandro. It's super clear. I learned a lot about the spatial planning scheme and the UNP Plus project. And thanks again to Gillian and Frida for making time and for starting these conversations and continuing them, I think. And thanks to all those people that joined us today.